Good evening. Call to order the Cumberland Town Council meeting for Monday, August 22nd, 2022. Before this meeting, at 6 o'clock, we had a workshop with the Lands and Conservation Commission regarding our forest management plan. So first order of business is the approval of minutes for August 8th, 2022.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor? Next item is our manager's report. Manager Shane?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am going to defer my time directly to the police chief, and then I'll follow up with Councilor Story King after his presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Shane. Good evening, councilors. Good to see you again. Eric, would you come up and join me, please? Councilors, it's my pleasure to introduce Officer Eric Bell to you and to the Cumberland community this evening. Eric joined our department on Monday, August 15th, and he's currently in a short field training program to familiarize him with our town and department operations. You probably know that generally our field training process is fairly lengthy, but I think when you hear a little bit about Eric's bio, you'll understand why this is going to be a little bit on the shorter side. Eric is a veteran of the United States Army, having served as a combat medical specialist for 6 years before embarking on his law enforcement professional journey. He's an experienced officer with over 19 years of full-time experience, having served most recently with the Auburn Police Department for nearly 18 years. During his time at Auburn, Eric has served as a patrol officer, a school resource officer, a field training officer, a corporal, and as a detective. During his 6 years as detective, he received specialized training from the United States Secret Service on the forensic examination of computers and cell phones in furtherance of investigations into child abuse and human trafficking. So he brings with him a wealth of knowledge and experience and is as excited to be a member of our department as we are to have him here. I did check with him to make sure I wasn't putting words in his mouth. He said that was true. And that really is an understatement. Eric's had a pretty amazing career and is going to be a huge resource to us and I think to other departments in the area with regard to investigations into those really specialized sort of crimes that he's been highly trained to investigate. So we're here to swear him in tonight, very excited about it. And at this point, I would ask Eric if he would come around this way. And Eric's wife, Kimberly, is going to be pinning his badge on. Kimberly, are you ready for your moment? Okay. If you would
It's a big
stand
TV
beside
audience, so be careful, Chief.
and then, Abby, if you would, administer his oath.
Please raise your hand and repeat after me. I, please state your name,
I, Eric Bell,
do swear
do swear
that I will support the Constitution
will support the Constitution
of this state and the United States,
of this state and the United States, so long as I continue a citizen thereof,
that I will faithfully discharge,
that I will faithfully discharge
to the best of my abilities,
to the best of my abilities
the duties incumbent on me
the duties incumbent on me
as a member of the Cumberland Police Department,
as a member of the Cumberland Police Department,
according to said Constitution and the laws of this state
according to said Constitution and the laws of this state
and the charter and ordinances of this town.
and the charter and ordinances of this town.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
Thanks so much.
Congratulations.
I may not be going home tonight.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you.
Welcome aboard, Eric. Welcome aboard.
Thank you, councilors. And as you can see, Eric brought a whole crew with him tonight, and quite a few members of the PD were able to join us. So I think that just goes to show the level of excitement about us having him here. We're pretty lucky. So thank you for a few minutes of your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, Chief.
Welcome aboard.
Whitney, can you turn the slide, can you turn the TV on? Madam Chair, the second part of my presentation, I was going to yield to Councilor Story King, who will update the council on the Rail to Trail MDOT meetings. And if we can get the television back on, people at home could see it as well. Well, I think they can see it, but that doesn't look very good, but
Still warming up.
there it goes.
So last week, or our last meeting was short because we were workshopping the survey, but I wanted to give you these numbers ahead of time. I've been attending these very frustrating meetings with the manager. They've been by Zoom, which is good because you can cut everyone off at like an hour and a half, and you know, you don't have a room mingling full of people, but it can also be frustrating in what sort of information gets shared. I wanted to share with you these numbers, these cost estimates, because that's always been a major concern for us, especially since we currently do not have any public access to any potential trails, rail trails. I want to point out that there are no zeros, no decimal points in these numbers, and a lot of zeros. Another thing I learned, actually, is these rails have been discontinued, but that's only a label. That doesn't mean anything. All it means is that no business along that rail has to be served. So for example, let's say Hancock Lumber, which does board this, does sit next to this rail. Let's say they decided that they wanted to bring in some lumber from New Hampshire. If this were an active line, because they're on the line, then that would have to be allowed. By discontinuing it, doesn't mean, it just means that you can't require the rail to be upgraded to be used. So it just allows the state to save some money in the annual maintenance. Now, if you look at, to restore the service, just the low freight, not high speed or anything, would be $13 million. If you wanted high-speed freight to upgrade these lines, it'd be $31 million. If you want a passenger, you want to upgrade this to passenger from Portland to Auburn, a 2018 estimate, so 4 years ago, that was estimated at $274 million for passengers between Portland. That's just upgrading the rails. Trail until rail for gravel only would be $47.5 million. Trail until rail paved, $55 million, not much difference. Rail with trail beside it, $90 million and for gravel, and paved would be $94 million. So these are big dollars. And I know that we have a lot of other things to spend money on as a state, as a culture, as a country. The number of participants and the public feedback during these meetings have all been in favor of, yes, let's have a bike trail. Yes, it's overwhelming. There were over 100 comments to the last meeting, and all but 2 were in favor of a bike trail. But I don't think the citizenry realizes how expensive it would be to make it into a bike trail. So I think part of my job here is to update us on how expensive it's going to be. I was very disappointed, and I called out Dick Woodbury on it, because if you remember, he came to us and wanted an endorsement, and we said, no, thank you. And then we rethought it and thought, well, if we endorse the committee, then we get a seat at the table. He misrepresented us in saying that all the town's select boards and councils were in support of this by voting for membership to this committee. So I did call him out on it. I haven't heard back from him on that. I think in the last meeting, the most compelling testimony was from a Bangor city councilor who had been just monitoring the meeting. And I don't know if you are aware, other than Mike and Ron, who ventured into the northern part of the state. He was saying, don't cut us off. Don't cut us off. Rail is going to be absolutely essential to the development and economic future of northern Maine. And if we turn this if we turn this into a trail and abandon any options for freight or, freight to northern Maine, that's going to sort of kill some of their things going on. And then, so this Rail Use Advisory Council has to come up with a recommendation in 2 or 3 months. By the end of the year, they have to come up with a recommendation. And the way the committee's all scattered all over the place, I think my recommendation would be to give no advice to the DOT. Let the DOT figure out what they can do and what they can pay for. But that's my report. Bill, you might want to add some things. I know it's frustrating for you at these meetings because, you know, it's nirvana out there for all the people who want a bike trail, but the reality is it's going to be very difficult for anything to happen.
Am I able to ask some questions?
Yeah.
Okay, so first, thank you for putting this together. I think it's really helpful
Yeah.
to see. I think a couple comments that I would have is, number one, I think people are in favor of a trail, I think, but no one had a number to it yet, which we do now have now, which obviously changes the conversation, right? The second thing would be, I feel like it was my understanding that by joining this council or this committee, the concept would be that we would explore potential options for this corridor.
Correct, and
right?
that's what all the options are.
Understood, and so now we have that again. So I don't think it was a waste doing this,
Right.
right? But my second, or my third point or question would be, how do these numbers tie out to communities? I mean, I can't understand how, if you wanted to have a passenger rail system, that the towns would be responsible for $274 million?
Right?
No, well, that's,
I don't
can't-
know.
That doesn't
I
seem
don't know,
feasible.
that's just the cost, and no one's talked about how these are going to be paid for at all.
Right, I mean, if
Like,
Amtrak.
one might assume if it was freight, then the users or the businesses using the freight might pay to upgrade.
Correct. Why would we pay for a freight truck
Right.
to move through our
Right.
town? We wouldn't, right? So
Right.
those numbers, that doesn't mean that that's 13 million to my community.
Unless it was serving businesses along, you know, we might, to attract business, but I'm not sure that we're interested in attracting any businesses that would need freight.
Right.
along
So
the 2
the
miles
reason I
that we
raise the
have.
questions is I don't want folks at home to sit and look at that number and to say, to get a passenger rail through our town is going to be $274 million
Correct.
to the town of Cumberland. So I'm interested to kind of hear how that breaks down to what the municipality's share is of those costs, should one of those options move forward. My personal thought is, I don't know why we would ever contribute to just freight moving through our town.
Right.
Or passenger rail. I would imagine if there's a for-profit train company, that they would front a lot of those costs because they are set to see the rewards for that passenger rail line too. But anyways, I just wanted to raise those points, but I appreciate you going to these meetings. It's helpful.
Mark, refresh my memory, when Dick Woodbury said, didn't he say that even if we just converted it to straight trail, that we were gonna have to pick up the cost?
We would have to pick up costs for maintaining and
Parking or potentially.
policing or,
Correct.
Okay.
and I can share with you from a friend who lives on the trail, on the railroad in Falmouth, that she's already getting transients in her backyard from Portland walking out. She has cameras on her property, so she has, you know, sort of evidence of that, but. And Portland has some social issues they definitely need to deal with, and
So, Bill, kind of coming out of the next couple months for recommendation, kind of the numbers were presented, to Mark's point, is the expectation not only that you're recommending what to do with it, and you, meaning the committee, but also kind of what that funding would look like? That doesn't seem like that would be the purview, because it will depend on kind of funding at the state level anyways.
Our purview is to make a recommendation to the Commissioner of the Department of Transportation, who then will agree with it, disagree with it, but it's part of what the legislature required to do this one and the Mountain Rail Division as well, the one up further up the lane. And, his expectation is the bulk of this would be federal highway dollars that would be coming to Maine, and there'd be somewhere between a 10% and who knows how much of a match. But those even 10% numbers are big numbers for us. So the big takeaway for me was the maintenance requirements. Once it was built, it would be required by the local community to maintain that, and most likely it would be built to ADA standards so that it would be maintained year-round. Haven't even gotten to the uses that would be allowed. For instance, would snowmobiles be allowed, and ATVs be allowed, and other motorized pieces of equipment, or was it just strictly non-motorized? No one's asked. I think our next meeting coming up is going to be a presentation from both the pro trail group as well as the pro train passenger train group. So the majority of the town's position that are being people that are representing the towns are trying to gather information to make a decision. And right now we've done a lot of refereeing between basically two camps, and it's unfortunate because I think there is still a lot of room and there's still a lot of abilities to listen. I think the takeaway for me is no different than what I thought it would be in the beginning, is that there may be some opportunities between adjoining neighbors and communities to build sections of this together through federal and state grants, but the cost of the bigger picture is difficult, because honestly, until you get to Yarmouth, there's not a lot to see. So it's nice in the Gloucester and North Yarmouth, and I had the ability to ride on the rails with one of the DOT workers and several of the committee members, that once you get into North Yarmouth and New Gloucester, there's a multitude of private crossings now to homes. So a road will come up to a house, cross over the tracks, and then the home will be on the other side. What happens to all of those? I mean, no one's talking about what they're allowing to happen on those rails today and those impacts down the road. So for me, still a lot of questions. We are really trying to push hard. When I say we, the towns that are represented there are really trying to push hard to have it in one of the performing arts centers that we have in our community, and have that meeting live and not via Zoom, because we'd like people to come, we'd like people to hear a presentation, and we'd like to hear questions from folks. Even if they just, hear it live, I think it's more impactful than sitting at home watching it on your computer screen, because it is hard, because Shirley will we'll have, the 18 members of the commission, and then we'll have 50 people out in Zoom land that are trying to get in, and they don't allow that conversation to happen until the very end of the meeting, and that's difficult too. It's difficult for us who have the interaction back and forth all the time.
The next meeting is Thursday,
This Thursday.
yes.
Thank you.
And anyone can hop on it. And in your packets, you have the last set of slides that was prepared for the meeting. And a link, and on
Yep.
the handout, there's a link that, to the DOT site for this particular endeavor.
Do you have a question?
I've had a little time to look over this presentation there in my email, and I just lost it. But anyways, this Saturday, I had a friend that I lives on Vinyl Haven, and conversation got on to talk about trails and rails, and I mentioned that about the down easter going down to Rockland. So locally, we have a housing task force that is looking at issues that for affordability, and it's a local impetus for this community to solve a problem that really exists far beyond our borders. And so if I look at that $274 million and I think about, what that might bring economically and to support this state, that short money, when you think about the opportunities that would lend to open up a good part of the state. If you could get passenger rail to Bangor, you get passenger rail to Lewis and Auburn, and all these communities along there that they have a stop, the opportunity for housing, there's so many opportunities that the passenger system would present to this state that I think that we're it would be very short-sighted not to be considering that. So that's my takeaway on that money.
And one extra question, Bill or Shirley, do you know, will we get to a point where we know what those potential costs to the municipalities would be? I mean,
Not
Otherwise-
before
Not
then.
not in this study.
yeah, otherwise, how can you make, I'm just scratching my head figuring out how can you make, this is nice to know the costs of these projects, but unless you know what it means to your community in terms of your tax base or your upkeep, as Mike was talking about.
They gave estimates in the report that you have in front of you, so much per mile and so forth. I think they're a little bit on the low side, so, but you figure, how do you have to plow that, you have to sand that, or do you just let it go? I don't know. We're not getting into that level of detail.
Right.
So that's
But-
why I think they're putting just general numbers together.
But that's estimates for upkeep, right?
That's
Not
correct.
estimates for your
Construction.
pro rata
Right.
construction costs, right?
That's
Okay.
in addition to those costs, there will be annual upkeep costs for each municipality.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Just Thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. Next item is public discussion. Public discussion is for comments on items that are not on the agenda. Comments are limited to 5 minutes per person. Rebuttal comments will be limited to 2 minutes. Public discussion topics may be brought up again under new business for further council discussion. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to comment on something not on the agenda? Go ahead.
Bruce Sherwin, am I on?
Yep.
Okay. Bruce Sherwin, Blanchard Road. This has to do with on the agenda, the trails thing. A couple of questions about it. These costs would be state costs, wouldn't they? Not community costs.
So
That's
I
my
think at this point is the estimate of the full cost of implementation to construct. Where that cost sits, I think is not
So-
at all established at this
So
point.
maybe, Mr. Shana, a community like Cumberland would have to contribute to rail upgrading?
Depending on which project came through.
Let's say, I'm talking just rail.
Just rail, probably not.
Have to put
Like the
any
3
cost.
miles we built here on the passing lane, I'll call it, from,
Yeah.
that was zero contribution from the
Yeah,
town.
Sorry, I meant to say just the rail. This is just rail.
Just rail, I would doubt it. I would
And
doubt it.
there's no estimate here of any economic benefit either.
That still is coming.
Somebody could be doing an estimate on that.
That is coming, Bruce. Next month, that report should be presented to the committee.
Because I'm with Bob Vale on the passenger rail to Lewiston, Auburn, and on to Bangor sometime could be a big one. Could be a big one.
Could be.
Especially as gas and cars and go to electric cars and stuff like that, and freight. So anyway, the other thing I would say is that I've thought about is, here we are in Cumberland, we're a small community with not that many taxpayers, and all of us have high tax bills. I just got mine. As far as the trails part goes, pathways, roads, whatever are put in, are usually put in for an economic reason. There is no economic reason for a trail, bike trail through here for Cumberland that I can see. There is no economic benefit. There is no access in Cumberland. My opinion would be if it's got to be done and got to be paid, it should be paid for people that get some benefit from it. Cumberland will get little benefit from this trail program. That's my 2 cents on that. I
Thank
think we
you.
need to look, there's no economic benefit for Cumberland to a trail. There's no commercial stuff near it. Falmouth has some, much closer. Yarmouth has a lot. That's just my thoughts on that. Thank you.
All right, moving to legislation and policy. Item number 22-0103, to hold a public hearing to consider proposed amendments to Article 2, Town Council, Section 5, induction of council into office of the town charter. The proposed amendment, Article 2, Section 5, would read, or does read, "The council shall meet at the municipal building on the second Monday of July, following the regular town election in June, and at said meeting, councilors-elect shall be sworn to the faithful discharge of their duties by a notary public or by the town clerk. I know Mr. Vale had brought this up for kind of to put on the ordinance committee's kind of consideration. Just kind of thinking through timing and kind of as it reads today, election happens on Tuesday and councilors are sworn in the following Monday. And that also means that if there is any changing of seat, that counselor who will no longer be serving, there is no meeting in between. This would also line up with the school boards swearing in, so they obviously elect their school board members at the same election that the town does, but then they hold their swearing in until July as well. I don't know, Shirley or Bob from Ordinance Committee, kind of any comments around this, or?
You've nailed it.
Okay.
So
The timing is important, though, because we have to put it to the voters,
Yes.
because it's an ordinance change.
Yep.
I think there's really a couple issues for me on this, of why this is an important change. I think for myself, when I was elected for my first term, all of a sudden, my assumption was, all right, July 1st is our start. And it was not the case at all. It's like the next day, which that's all right. But I think it's a little awkward. And I think my proposal is a smoother transition because there's still a second meeting in June that would occur. And even though the wording that we have in front of us doesn't really lay that out, but I think we can all understand it, that there is a second meeting in June before the first meeting that would occur in July. And the opportunity that I feel it's more of a fairness thing, and it takes the awkwardness out of people who are transitioning off the board for one reason or another, and for those people who are coming on the board. So as the case, there's a lot of things that are moving parts throughout the year that people are involved with, and so those people who are stepping aside, and it gives them the opportunity to finalize their service. It gives an opportunity for those of us that are on the board or remaining on the board to recognize their term in service. And then it allows the new person coming on in July a fresh, clean start. So I think it's a good change. I think that's it.
And this really has nothing to do with this proposed amendment, but this has been sort of my bugaboo over the years. And I said it to Mark, and he took it to heart. But if you're running for Cumberland Town Council, I would love to see you in the council chambers for more than just the meeting before you're elected, or when you're elected. I think it would certainly ease the transition for everyone in the town if people who are interested started coming to our meetings. We're not scary.
Just point of clarification, I came for your cinnamon rolls that you made.
That was the budget meeting.
I have a question, and I will apologize if I should know this. But does this impact kind of the chairmanship and vice chairmanship? Would that still happen? Would that happen with this? Like, is there another change that needs to happen, or is that not part of our charter and therefore is just policy, if you will? Okay, got it. Okay. It is not in our charter and therefore doesn't need to be part of this. There's nothing else to change.
Not codified.
Yep. Go ahead.
I guess I just need a little more explanation. I don't see any great advantage to changing a charter change. The person that's going out knows they're going out. The person that's coming in knows he's coming in. Don't do that, Bob. I realize it gives them an extra week, I believe, if I do the math right.
It would give them usually almost 2.5, almost 3 weeks from the election to that second Monday in July. It would be one more council, it would be a council meeting in between, but from the time of election, so So in this case, right, it was June 14th. They wouldn't have been sworn in until July 8th almost. So it is potentially a decent chunk of timing to get your giant binder from Bill, read the chart, do all that. And then there'd be one meeting where the outgoing counselor would be able to close loose ends, counselors that are staying on to recognize, as Bob said, and that it would give a little bit of time for the newly elected to actually get up to speed with active material before having to vote on things.
So the equivalent of, I mean, we think in terms of presidential elections where the election's in November and they don't actually take office until January, right? There's this gap period of time to kind of switch from maybe campaign mode to actually governing mode.
Just seems like a lot of work for very little, to me.
Can
I mean,
someone clarify a little bit more on the lining it up with the school board?
That's correct. Lines up with the school board and with the town of North Yarmouth.
That's how so they don't swear in their newly elected until their July meeting.
Got it. And that is important for what reason?
No reason.
Nothing, it just is sharing that that's like common, or that is around us and in our partner municipal bodies,
Yeah.
that is their timing as well.
Got it.
For those of you who have been here for 25 years, it probably doesn't matter.
You know what's coming.
Only 17.
Who's
I-
counting?
Yeah, I mean, I will say to the point of like, oh, what does it matter? There were things, right, with Mark and I being elected as, as chair and vice chair at that end of June. We didn't do things with MSAD 51 board and the North Yarmouth until that July because we didn't know who their elected bodies were. So I will say, like, there's still a bit of like a lame duckish kind of happening or a pause when it comes to kind of anything that's having to happen between the groups, because it's kind of an awkward timing of they know that people are leaving, ours have already been there, so I will just throw that out there. But I don't think that's the main reason, but
I think it's clean. July 1st, 3 years, July 1st.
I guess it wouldn't be July 1st, it would be
First meeting.
it'd be the first meeting of July. Just to be clear,
Okay.
for the words.
You going to open the public hearing?
Are we good, our questions? I will open if there's any comments from the public. Yep, I'm opening it now.
I would wonder why, if it's possible, I'm not an expert on this stuff, but I would word it as the first council meeting in July and not be pinned to a day or a specific week. Because you may have one that come up that you needed to do something before that one. And it would also give you flexibility to change the day if you had to, for some reason.
Well,
I would not pin it to a day, I would make it the first council meeting in the new fiscal year. I'd even word it that way, in the new fiscal year.
I like that.
That was my thought on it.
Mr. Sherwin, I think it's
Yeah.
that way because that is how our charter is written for when our meetings are to be held.
Are you not
It-
rewriting the
It
charter
matches
here?
up with our charter when our meetings are to be held,
Or
I like the
Yeah,
change,
we have
Shirley.
second and
Just
fourth.
to say the
Yeah.
first meeting in July.
I think, well, the first
Yeah,
meeting,
it's-
your charter could say
It's the
that
same one way or
the
the,
meeting schedule, but, so
Yeah.
that
I
would be
think it
it.
gets the same result.
yeah,
Is that what you're saying?
Anyway,
it's the same. We'd have to change the charter to change our dates. And if we changed our charter to
charter
change
says
our
Mondays.
dates.
The charter
Second
currently,
and
the
fourth
yeah, the
Mondays.
Yeah.
charter currently says second and fourth
so-
Mondays.
But
of
this
the
is talking about changing the charter.
Right.
So, yeah, so.
Just
A
that
different
part-
provision,
section
a
of the
different
charter.
section of the charter, right?
To the layman, it sort of looks all the same, but
Right,
when you talk the charter,
You
you
could
can,
call,
you
you
could
could
change
call a
that in the
special
charter,
meeting
too.
at any time
that's
with
true,
proper notice.
right,
I mean, extenuating circumstances may
right.
dictate
Disasters,
So I kind of
that-
like the
that's-
idea of the first meeting in July.
okay.
Mr. Stiles?
Madam Chair, Bill Stiles, Range Road. If something's not broke, why try and fix it? Is the way I look at this. I think this is somebody's pipe dream, personally, when the election has gone up and you're out of office, you cease to represent the council of that day. Instant you do that, you minus the number of councilors that have been taken off the dais. Secondly, if you're interested in going to be on the council, you should come and sit at a couple of meetings, as Shirley has said, as Mark did. Mark came to several meetings to know what's going on. So if you feel you're not ready to keep step, it's your fault. Nobody else's fault. And see what else I have in mind. Trying to line up with another community, I don't care whether it's North Yarmouth, the school board, or Falmouth, is ridiculous. We're running our own program here. If anything, I think the schools should try and align up with us. They're generally out of session at that time. They should have a little more maneuverability. And I would suggest that if I were running to replace any one of you, because you were proposing something that I was against, I would want to be able to make a function at the time I got elected. Transferring it for almost a month, one, in my mind, leaves the council void of those positions. Two, inhibits the new councilor from participating. And three, might be illegal if you tried to pass something without the other 2 or 3 councilors there. So with all of that, I strictly am against this.
I got to respond to that, Bill. A term of office is determined by the charter or the laws of the state or the federal government. You serve from X to X, and whether you've been voted out or voted in, your start date and your finish date don't necessarily coincide with the election. And certainly the presidential and our state legislature, our state senate don't coincide with the date of election. So I don't really think that's a valid point, but I do agree with you on we're not doing this because North Yarmouth or the school board are doing it. I think we're doing this, at least from my opinion, I think this makes a smoother transition.
It makes a smoother transmission, Bob, because you're giving a guy 2 or 3 more days to get where he should have been when he was elected. And furthermore, you can't bring in presidential elections or state elections because they operate under different rules. You have to go by what we have set here in our charter. And I believe our charter says you're out of office when you're voted out, that day. So you can't revert back to something else. It's not the same. And I would have maintained that if you did that and a party was upset by how things were going, you're liable. That's what I would say.
So I guess the question is, from a legal standpoint, when the ordinance committee was reviewing it, was there any concern that the current counselor that did not earn re-election would not be able to serve at that June meeting?
No. I mean, no.
Okay.
Yeah, it does raise a question, right, about, let's say there's 3 folks up for reelection, and all 3 of them currently sitting counselors lose those seats, just hypothetically. But then those same 3 counselors who have just lost an election show up to the next meeting and vote, basically creating an almost majority, I think is what Mr. Stiles is talking about, to pass something. The legal question would be, did they have the authority to vote in that particular issue? Were they still technically an acting counselor with the authority vested in them to make that vote, right? I don't know the answer to that question, but it would strike me that until someone else had taken their seat under our charter, they probably did, unless there's some other type of rule that says something otherwise. But this is why we have a town attorney to look these things up, I would think.
Well, if you read the charter, it basically says you are a town councilor until you have been replaced, essentially, in the Reader's Digest version. So until there's somebody that
right.
replaces you, you could be in July or later if we haven't replaced you.
But I think that we would need to define what replacement means, right? Does replacement mean that you have been technically voted out of office? So would somebody be showing up at the meeting in more of a ceremonial capacity versus a legal acting capacity? I think that kind of needs to get worked out, right?
My
I
understanding,
served,
my understanding, the way this went was that if you are if you are not seeking reelection, because we used Ron as an example, if you are not seeking reelection and no one runs against you, and even just a handful of people wrote your name in, you would still continue on as a counselor
Until you're replaced.
until you resign, and the council then appoints someone to replace you. That was my understanding. So you may not even run for office and still have to serve. Just warning, just giving you a fair warning, Ron.
Get used to it, Ronnie.
so in the practical application, I served 5 terms on the school board, and July 1st to July 1st to July 1st. There was no question about, whether I was serving honorably or I was trying to disrupt something by taking a vote or in another action. I think that if you look at how it has worked, and my experience with the school board is that there hasn't been a problem with that type of, you have an election and you take your office July 1st. So I don't have concern for that.
Mr. Turner?
George Turner, Carriage Road. I spent 22 years on the appeals board here. I spent 16 years on the council. I'll just give you my slant that goes a little bit along the lines of what Bill Stiles said. I think when the people vote and they vote you out as an individual, you should be out when the vote is actually calculated, tabulated, and done. As far as the ceremonial part of the thing and swearing the counselor in who has just been elected, it doesn't, I think from the standpoint of the people who elected the person they elected, I think they like to see them have authority from the time that election actually took place. Regardless of what the state or the federal government does, we have a charter. We have certain language in the charter. I think it's definitely arguable that the person who's elected should take authority when those votes have been tabulated. It shouldn't be a month later. And in the interim, the person who lost the vote, Mark beat me handily. And I appreciate the fact that he did in a way, because I was probably around too long. But the bottom line is, when that vote took place, as far as I was concerned, I was done. It wasn't ceremonial or anything else. I was done at the time. And by expanding this to up to 3.5 weeks or maybe even a month, I just think you're borrowing a little bit of potential trouble when it comes to any kind of authority that ousted counselor wields during that 3.5 week potentially interim. It's just a question of simple fairness when you think about when voters vote, they voted for a reason. And they didn't vote to have somebody who they voted out sticking around for an extra 3.5 weeks with any authority. The question is, does that counselor still have any authority? And the answer in my mind is no. So that's what I suggest you think about.
Can you get to the mic just so that folks at home can hear you?
I didn't know if you'd let me. Does the charter, you talk about the charter a lot here, does the charter define the term of a counselor? Does it define it? Does it go fiscal year, July 1 to 6/30, like most residents would think it would? I think you're elected for the fiscal year is what I would guess, but I don't know it. So, I mean, if
So
you're gonna talk about
what
the
you
charter,
have in the current charter is, in the current charter, you have the council shall meet at the municipal building on the Monday following the regular town election, and that said meeting, councilors elect shall be sworn in to do, to faithful discharge of their duties. So it basically does define the term to you're a counselor until the next person is sworn in, which has always been the Monday after the election. So that's the way it's been. So there is no meeting, because the first item on those council meetings is to swear in the newly elected counselors. So that's typically when you're doing the chair and the vice chair and a lot of the
Right.
administrative procedures.
And I guess just to be clear, it is until the newly elected counselor is sworn in. Because if for some reason, natural disaster or whatever, if a special meeting's held that week after an election, the counselor that was not reelected would still be expected until that counselor was sworn in the following Monday to
Correct.
serve in their duties.
Correct.
Go ahead.
Dave Noonan, Meadow Lane. Just for my own clarity, that person that just got sworn in, say on that following Monday, do they have the ability right then and there to make their vote?
Yes.
And that's always happened before?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
that was just for my own clarity, I wasn't sure.
Good question. Yep.
Good thing.
Yeah, once you're sworn in, your duty is to act as and you're fully.
This is not the hill to die on.
I agree, Bob.
But again, I think the, July 1st, 3-year term, July 1st, it's not a big deal. If, and it's not a big deal to leave it the way it is. I happen to think that there's some benefit to, July to 1st to July 1st, 3 years, 3-year term, and it doesn't, to me, watching the state and federal government and the actions there, you have a lame duck session. We all could say that's, nothing much ever gets done at a lame duck session. And probably that last meeting, probably not much is going to get done either. I'm going to vote for it, but as I said, it's not the hill to die on.
I guess the important question is, if you stay on for another month, you get another big council stipend check. I guess that would be the important part.
It's not a month. Let's be
And what
clear.
does that calculate to dollar-wise, about 10 cents?
Yeah, just about.
Yeah.
I think it's $10 per meeting. I think that's what I think it's actually written up that way.
Oh, and then we just get it quarterly. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I guess personally, I see the benefits of it. I guess I look at it, I don't usually go into the world assuming negative intent, so I didn't assume that a counselor that would not be reelected would use that one meeting to, or multiple counselors, I guess, if there were 3, to pass something that they were clearly just not elected for a reason to potentially pass. So I guess I didn't see the negative as so forcefully laid out as kind of the possibility. I have a little more faith in the folks that I think try to run for these offices. But it is a fair point, and obviously a risk in kind of having someone who has just lost be able to cast a vote on behalf of citizenry whose vote they did not just win.
Which is, I think, I know you were at that school board meeting when they were trying to decide chair and vice chair, and that was awful.
Hence my question about, do we have other things we have to change or
mean,
would think to change under this?
Well, Mr. Vail has been discussing for some time a need to sort of get our policies around those kind of, decisions put into place to prevent that kind of debacle. But it could certainly happen, and there are elections where there are 3 counselors up for reelection. There are years, sometimes there's just 2, but
Since you brought that up, I will respond to that. I did watch that. I was there. I believe that was a travesty of democracy.
Yeah.
To have an outgoing board choose an incoming chair when the new that vote should have taken with the new board with the new members present. And I would hope that this board would never, this council would never do something like that. That's just wrong. Anyways.
Any other thoughts, questions?
My concern for the manager right now is we have to do this tonight for it to get done for November. And we don't have the exact wording. Unless we say, use this wording. It doesn't say July 1st, and I know a number of you have said you'd
Oh,
like it to
yes.
be July 1st. We don't have that language here. I've been kind of wordsmithing it here, but I'm not comfortable with wordsmithing something so important right now. I think, like Bob said, it's not a hill to die on, that we could do it another year. We can't vote on charter changes until November.
Right.
No, that's not true.
Oh, we can?
Mike, because of Mike's question, we can vote on them in June, but we have to have a specific number that has always been 50-50 if we're going to get that number in June.
So if we voted on it in June and it passed or didn't pass or whatever, but we didn't have enough of the electorate show up,
It
it would
wouldn't
be,
count. Right,
Wouldn't,
it would not be an election. It
right.
would-
Well, the same thing could happen in November. Remember, 30% that voted in the last gubernatorial election is what the watermark is. That could happen in a November election where you have a referendum question from the state that nobody wants to come out to vote on, so.
Right.
And it's happened before, where we've had a low turnout in November as well, so it could happen either way. And June has been gaining in popularity, but, you know, we've had some very bad Junes too, so.
Yeah, we didn't have a very good one this year, right?
It was okay. I mean, 28, 30%. I mean, it was close to 30. And remember, it's 30% of the vote in the gubernatorial election. So if it's 50%, it's 30% of 50%, so.
so either it sounds like we would be putting a motion forward, the wording as it stands now, or, right,
I have to say, I have a huge amount of respect for our former counselors who have just both showed up here to speak on this matter. I think what they have said has weighed heavily in my opinion of this matter.
My inclination is to make a motion, but would be amended to moving it to, you know, either the first meeting of the council in July or specifying the first couple of days of the month of July. There's no need to hold off until the second Monday of July, or we could actually just say the first regular scheduled meeting of the council in July, but,
but I think the concern is that with it being a charter change and needing the exact wording in this motion, are we comfortable? Like, I know normally we can wordsmith on the fly, but it doesn't necessarily feel like this would be one of those normal times where we can just kind of wordsmith our way through it.
all right.
That just making sure kind of legally how it coincides with other things in our charter and making sure that we are not going against anything. If this is not the wording we're going to go with, feels like we should table at the very least.
Well, I'm going to make the motion as written. It'll give you the chance to not second it, and then we can move to table it. Or you could second it, and we can vote it down and move to table. But anyways, Madam Chair, I'll make the following motion. I move to approve the proposed amendments to Article 2, Town Council, Section 5, Induction of Council into Office of the Town Charter. And further, I will read the proposed amendment. The council shall meet at the municipal building on the first on the second Monday of July following the regular town election in June, and at said meeting, councilors elect shall be sworn to the faithful discharge of their duties by a notary public or by the town clerk.
Appears to be no second at this time.
Looks like that, doesn't it?
I'm tempted, though, just to have a
I'm
vote.
gonna go home and cry in my beer. This has never happened to me
All right,
before.
I'll second, just so we can have a vote. So we know which direction we're headed.
Right.
And this is where I really miss Steve Moriarty on the ordinance committee, because he could have done the wordsmithing for us. Thank you for serving in the legislature, Steve, if you're
Yeah.
watching.
I will just say my concern and why I will be voting against it at this time is I'm a little concerned we don't have all of our ducks in a row when it comes to, because it's policy and not charter, like how the vice chair chairmanship. And so this feels a little preemptive in some ways if we were to pass this. And I apologize because this is somewhat just like putting all this in a row of like, this is the charter change, but if we don't have on our docket to also review our policies and expect that to be in place, then it feels like we're a bit out
We
of
have no
sync.
policies on this, actually, so to change a policy,
It's just a decision.
yeah, it's past practice. So I kind of feel that is an irrelevant reason to vote for or against this. I just,
Go ahead.
I would just like to say that nobody loves the idea of efficiency and lining up two different policies among multiple towns that collaborate on things like schools and other massive projects more than I do. I absolutely would love that. To streamline the efficiency of it, I really would love to see. That said, I think the benefit to having that efficiency, in my mind, doesn't currently outweigh the potential concern that I raised. And again, not indicating that anyone here is nefarious or trying to collude together as three outgoing counselors to get something accomplished, but it's a possibility. And so one of the things I want to make sure is that the people's voices are heard, and I think I really respected hearing Mr. Stiles and Mr. Turner's comments on it as well. So that's one of the reasons I would probably not be supporting this today as well, but I do like the sentiment behind it.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion does not pass. So then for 22-104 is
Motion to table.
motion tabled.
I'll make the motion to table.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor? Unanimous. 22-105 to authorize the issuance of senior property tax assistance program payments. Sorry, closed down during the discussion. So we had 180 residents qualified for the tax assistance program and will be receiving a refund check kind of per their qualification to apply towards their fiscal year '23 property taxes. The refunds did total $95,394.89. Any questions or comments from the council? Any questions or comments from the public? All right.
I did have
Oh,
one
go
question,
ahead.
actually. Is this 180 residents, maybe this question is for Whitney Miller as I'm looking for her. Sorry to make you get up here. Is 180 residents fewer than we've had in the past, or is it about the same that we've had in past years?
We're about the same, and actually, so that memo I wrote last week, we have a couple more applicants that have come through in the last couple of days, and I think we were at 189 by the time we were done last year, so we're not completely done taking applications, but this is the majority of them at this point.
When
And
is the, when
comparable.
is the cutoff for those applications, just for folks that,
I would think tonight,
oh,
if we're voting on it.
Yeah.
You haven't really cut them off until, till the taxes were due, usually in the end of September. So we have enough in the fund to fund additional stragglers, and there's usually less than a handful that come in after this meeting, so.
great. Thank you. Thanks, Whitney.
So is this list not updated because 988 and 1,700 do not add up to be 95,000? There, that's under.
That list was corrected and purged over the weekend, and it was updated to the numbers that Whitney just stated. So we believe the full amount will be closer to 100,000 when it's all over. By the time, we've averaged a little over 500 per resident. I think it's close to 530-ish. So I believe that will continue for a couple more weeks, and as long as there was money in the funds, we allowed it to stay open. We're very close to basically wiping out the fund, so the Finance Committee will have to look at that next year and look at potentially end-of-year revenues going to support this program for next year. So that'll come up during probably the Finance Committee's first quarter report.
Are these numbers up or down from last year?
They're up. They're definitely up. They're up by almost, I think, 20% in some cases. I think what you found is that we had many more people qualify for the max in Part A. Remember, Part A was your total tax increase, and then Part B was your income piece. So last year, we had a very small property tax increase. This year, it was larger, and that resulted in the numbers you see before you.
I'll make a motion.
Go for it.
I move to authorize the issuance of senior property tax assistance program payments.
Second.
Go ahead.
We have a second and a motion. Any discussion, questions? Oh, go ahead.
Just a quick glance down the list of names here is a good indication of where this assistance going, and this is an important program. It benefits longtime residents of this community. Some of these people have lived here 50, 60, 70 years, and it's imperative that we continue to fund this. And it has my wholehearted support.
We encouraged others while they were here. We were filling out their applications for the state 65 and over program as well. We explained the other state program that was an entire deferral of their property taxes as well, and tried to have them set up meetings with John Brushwine to just see if that would work for them, because there's some other nuances that we couldn't explain all the details in the $40,000 program, where it was a complete deferral of your property taxes if you had a minimal amount of assets and your annual income tax was under 40,000, you were eligible for that state program. So there were several that made appointments with John and met with John as well. So it was a good education piece for all of us, and John got inundated with, because they all went home and told their friends, like 250 applications in the first week. So we'll see where it goes.
And by that, you mean you're talking about LD 290, right?
LD 290,
Gotcha.
right.
Okay.
All right. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Thank you. Item 22-106, to hold a public hearing to consider and act on a mass gathering permit for Binney Media's Fall Ultimate Yard Sale to be held on September 10th from 9 to 3 p.m. at the Cumberland Fairgrounds. Any questions or comments from the council? Do we have anyone from Cumberland? I'm not seeing.
No.
Okay,
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion.
go for it.
I move to approve the mass gathering permit for Benny's Media Fall Ultimate Yard Sale to be held on September 10th from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. at the Cumberland Fairgrounds.
Second.
Any questions or comments from the public? All those in favor? Twenty-two 107 to hold a public hearing to consider and act on a mass gathering permit for the Maine Principals Association South Regional Cross Country Championships to be held at Twin Brook Recreational Facility on October 22nd from 8:30 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. Any questions or comments from the council? Any comments from the public?
Mr. Manager, do we have any sort of user fee from the MPA for this? I know that at one point we have collected what they estimated would be like an attendance kind of thing. I remember raising concerns, they don't rent the Civic Center for free. And I have concerns about Twin Brooks being used for free.
Not this time. We did not get into a payment for use of the facility, primarily because we're trying to get back to some normalcy. And I think that recommendation, also, I don't know where it was with the Twin Brook Committee, but I didn't see anything specific, and I don't even know if
Yeah,
they
we
met.
haven't.
So Tammy's memo was basically related to all town incurred fees, and those were all covered. The Booster Club memo was basically that the Booster Clubs would be staffing the concession stand. Lions Club didn't want to do it. So usually they kind of rotate that out through the rec department on who staffs that and so forth. So I can bring that back to that group, especially to Pete Bingham and Patty Murphy, and just ask that we look at next year perhaps getting back to some type of use fee for the facility. We did do that several years ago. I think it was either per car or per person fee.
It was based on, number of athletes
year,
and
yeah.
potential spectators
Right.
and a cost that kind of got fed out to the MPA.
Right.
I'm getting tired of basketball funding everything the MPA does.
Right.
Do I have a motion?
I'll give you a motion,
Go
Madam
for it.
Chair. I move to approve the mass gathering permit for the Maine Principals Association's South Regional Cross Country Championships to be held at Twin Brook Recreational Facility on October 22nd from 8:30 a.m. to 3:30 p.m.
Second.
Motion and a second. Do I have any comments or questions from the public? All those in favor? All those opposed? 22-108 to hold a public hearing to consider and act on a mass gathering permit for the Maine Principals Association's State Cross Country Championships to be held at Twin Brook Recreational Facility on October 29th from 8:30 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. Any questions or comments from the council?
Same concerns.
Noted.
Yeah, and it looks like this is just a change from the South Regional
Right, to now
Championships
it's
to the
the
state, right?
The following week.
And I'm thrilled they want to have them here, and I
Yep.
support cross-country runners. I'm just not about doing it for free to the Maine Principals Association. I'll probably be there because I have friends running.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, I'll give you another motion if
Go
you're looking
for
for
it.
one. I move to approve the mass gathering permit for the Maine Principals Association's State Cross Country Championships to be held at Twin Brook Recreational Facility on October 29th from 8:30 a.m. to 3:30 p.m.
Second.
Motion is second. Any questions or comments from the public? All those in favor? Thank you.
I'd like to add that I would be more than thrilled to accept a gift from the Maine Principals Association because they're grateful for the use of our facility if they are so inclined.
Wow. Pass it on.
How sizable a gift were you anticipating?
I know I'm not the town attorney, but I think we should refrain from gift discussion to public officials.
Moving to 22-109, to hold a public hearing to consider and act on amendments to Chapter 315 zoning, Article 6, General Regulations, Section 63 signs of the Cumberland Code to ensure consistency with state guidelines for temporary off-premise, non-commercial signs as recommended by the Planning Board.
So moved.
I'll second.
This is,
Just to give a little
yeah,
background.
thank you, Shirley.
This is the politically correct definition of campaign signs and any other kind of signs advertising maybe a particular event, like Greeley football starting up this year or something along that line.
And I think, again, it's not shortening or changing the cumulative, it's clarifying that it is 6 weeks in the first 6 months of the year and 6
6
weeks
weeks
in
in-
the second 6 months of the year, and not kind of a cumulative 12. So,
And it is not regulating signs that are actually on private property. But a lot of people think their private property extends to the roadside, and lots of times it doesn't.
yes. Any questions or comments from the council? Any questions or comments from the public? All those in favor? Thank you. 22-110, to consider and act on setting the following household waste disposal events. Confidential shredding, Saturday, October 1st, from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Universal waste collection, Saturday, October 8th, from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Bulky item pickup week, October 10th through the 14th.
So,
We've got a so moved.
second.
Second from Mike. I will just note there's no hazardous waste. That is consistent with last year. We do look at it every year, but the cost is quite sizable for the town, and so we choose not to do that. Do you have a question, Ron? or comment?
Just a question for the manager. Bill, can businesses in town use the confidential shredding as well as residents? And I've been asked by a couple of different people, and that's why I'm asking.
Typically, these are for households and not for businesses because of the volume of materials that some businesses can produce, and there may be better ways to do that as a business than coming here and waiting in line, because there are long lines.
Okay.
So,
And I mean, it's just a question. I mean, I think a few people are nervous with all this hiring of these new IRS agents, so.
they'll be in line, I heard. I don't know. They're going to mix it up a little bit, so.
Thank you.
I have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments from the public? All those in favor? 22-111, to set a public hearing date of September 12th to consider and act on amendments to Chapter 78 explosives of the Cumberland Code as recommended by the Ordinance Committee. Shirley?
So most of the work we did on this was updating definitions and also putting the burden of notification onto the people who are blasting, and extending the blasting area that they had to notify, and also ensuring that communication about potential blasting be directly communicated to the code enforcement officer, instead of sort of after the fact or the day of, but that they have to let the code enforcement officer know that they intend to blast, and that they've duly notified
The surround.
people in the circle.
So one of the things that this addresses, and I think probably one of the most important things is pre-blast surveys. And before, the blasting company was under no obligation to share the surveys with anybody. They always had to do is say, we did surveys and we did post-blast surveys. Now the requirement is that they have to share that with the code enforcement officers, so pre-blast surveys and the post-blast surveys. So this is an important piece of being able to identify people's complaints and, you know, I didn't have a crack foundation and now I do.
Yeah.
And now they have a way to keep everybody honest.
Any questions or comments from the public?
I'll give you a motion, Madam Chair. I move to set a public hearing date of September 12th to consider an act on amendments to Chapter 78 explosives of the Cumberland Code as recommended by the Ordinance Committee.
Second.
All those in favor? Thank you. 22-112, to authorize the town manager to accept payment for delinquent fiscal year 2019 taxes in the amount of $600 on property identified as map U19, lot 18.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments from the public? Council? All those in favor? That concludes legislation and policy. Moving to new business. I will start to my left, Mr. Kopp, but wait, first, just a quick rundown. We do have quite a few kind of ad hoc meetings coming up that we wanted to make sure everyone was aware of. September 12th, prior to that council meeting, regularly scheduled council meeting at 6 p.m., we will have a workshop with Aaron Bateman of Phoenix Management regarding the senior housing on Drown Road and just getting an update and a kind of a workshop discussion on what's happening there and in other facilities. September 13th at 6 p.m., we'll be meeting in the council chambers. This will be a meeting between the Cumberland Town Council, North Yarmouth Select Board, and MS80 51 School Board. This is something we've aimed to do 2 to 3 times a year as kind of a joint workshop. September 15th at 7 p.m., I think we are still planning to have a meet the candidates. I know we've had a couple of candidates unfortunately drop out after committing due to some conflicting commitments, so we'll see. October 26th at 6 p.m., the town council will be doing a workshop with the planning board and the town attorney regarding LD 2003. Mr. Kopp.
I'd like to donate my $20 to the 4-H food pantry and another $20 from my good friend Dean, who's been very generous. The Cumberland Fair is about a month away now, Mr. Stiles. I want to keep this rolling. This is a very worthy cause. If everybody would like to see our town manager standing in the audience with his hand up, keep bidding. He needs more money. So if everybody could donate, it's a very worthy cause, and it goes to a very good organization. That's all I have.
Thank you. Mr. Rail?
I was thinking that as the weather is starting to cool, actually it hasn't been starting to cool, but I was thinking that I should have a new sweatshirt, and I'd like to bring up the issue again of maybe getting some sweatshirts or T-shirts, you know, even though it's the bicentennial has passed, the goods that we bought there, coffee cups, T-shirts, sweatshirts, I wonder if we could maybe interest somebody to, you know, put a shelf out there at the town entry there and maybe offer it for sale.
And who will pay for this? Out of just questioning. Do you want us to basically?
Well, I would buy the sweatshirt if you put it up for sale.
Right, but we're not going to sell them one at a time. So that's the issue. I think it's a great idea, Bob. I think maybe if we could bring it to the Finance Committee and just put together a plan, because my issue is that this is going to cost money, and it's T-shirts. Not everybody's not the same size. We're not going to be doing returns. We can basically send them to Brian Gilbert's, and I think he'll get you anything you want at his shop. So I'm just a little bit nervous about trying to, he can, if he wants to, as part of his business promotion, I'll set up Cumberland Swag, if you call it, whatever you want to call it, if he wants to continue with that. But I think, you know, for us to do it, it would be a little bit clunky, just because
I
it'd
might
be one
add,
by one.
though, that the Cumberland Historical Society does sell quite a bit of Cumberland swag.
With
and I
Historical
think that-
Society logos.
Yeah, no, not all of it. Like my Cumberland hat just says Cumberland and has the zip code on the back. And, yeah, it doesn't say Historical Society, it just says Cumberland. And I do believe you can buy some of that swag at the library. You'd have to go to the library, though. I don't think they have sweatshirts.
Carolyn Small has some left over because I have a hat that has the Maine insignia of the state of Maine on it, and it's 04021 on the rear. And I've had numerous people ask me where
Yeah.
I got it, because they do like the looks of them. I mean, and if you can go to Brian Gilbert and buy one, that might be just advertise it on the website saying, you know, if you want one of these, go
Yeah,
to Brian
and I know
Gilbert.
Carolyn was at the farmer's market a few times doing it.
She has, yes.
We have a library, Cumberland Historical Society member who might have something to add in the back of the audience.
Mr. Stiles?
Historical Society puts these on sale periodically. The next one will be at the Cumberland Fair. So all of those items they will have at the fair. And if you see Carolyn Small, you probably.
Can you guys repeat that so people?
I was just going to
yeah.
say. So-
Carolyn Small will be at the Cumberland Fair, and you will be able to purchase these at the Cumberland Fair. And if I know Carolyn, if she doesn't have one, she'll go find you one, so.
Be ready, get your checkbook out.
That's
because you're
all
gonna
I
have to
got.
buy a few.
And if you're not going to the fair, Bob, I'll pick one up for you, so.
I bet Carolyn would deliver.
Mark?
I just wanted to, for new business, just to say thank you, Chairman, or no, not Chairman anymore, but Councilor Vale, and I have been serving with, or sitting in meetings with folks from the Cumberland Affordable Housing Task Force Committee. We're doing that every 2 weeks, and it is a great group of folks, really dedicated, really knowledgeable in their own areas. And so I just wanted to start by saying thank you to the volunteers and the public servants here in Cumberland, who might not be sitting up here with us, but still come to meetings week after week and do their homework and come prepared for the council. So that thank you goes out to basically everyone who's on a committee or a subcommittee helping us make informed decisions. And that's all I've got.
After Eric Bell was sworn in to the Cumberland Police Department tonight, I text the president of the Auburn Union, who I represent, and his reply was, he's a great guy, super level-headed, great pickup for Cumberland and a huge loss for us. I think that really goes to the heart of the candidates that we attract here at Cumberland, so really, and that's all I have, Madam Chair.
I just want to do a quick report out of the ordinance committees. We had probably 7 items on our agenda, and then the manager added one at the last minute. So we only got through a few items, but one of the items was really important for us to be thinking about, and that has to do with setbacks in the VCC on Route 100. After much discussion, we have sent a request to have the planning board review a change in the setback requirements from 45 feet to 25 feet in order to allow buildings to maybe put some of the, allow some development to put parking in the back or off to the side. And so that's going to the planning board now. It was a 2-1 vote out of the ordinance committee, and it was still a difficult decision to send it forward. So I want the rest of the council to be thinking about that and have a look at maybe some of the depictions of that. Hopefully, we have an electronic copy.
We do.
So that took up, it was supposed to be 10 minutes. It took up about 45. And then Mike Schwint visited us. The LCC would like a definition for prime farmland. So we started taking a look at some of the definitions out there. The federal government is notoriously vague on their definition of prime farmland. So we're having to look at what some other definitions are. So we're still working with the attorney on that one. Another item coming forward is the addition of telecommunication towers. Does the whole council know the chief of police won a grant to look at telecommunication?
I don't know, I knew he was
The
putting
chief
in for
won a
it.
grant of $20,000 to look at telecommunication for our police department and for our public emergency services. That would involve the fire and police. And so we're just beginning discussion about how we're going to make those cell towers work. Who's going to pay for them? How are we going to pay for them? Can we get private industry to put up the towers and then give them maybe a break on their taxes if they allow the town to put emergency communications on the towers and so forth? So that's also, Bill will probably talk about that more in his manager's report. And so we still have discussion coming up for erosion and sedimentation control, impact fees, site plan subdivisions regarding foundation elevation, and foot drains, and then the Murray policy on what do we do with taxes and what that looks like in view of new legislation. So we've been busy. I'm not sure when our next meeting is. I'm away, then the manager's away, but I'll keep you posted.
We'll make it work.
Thank you. The only new business item I wanted to throw out there is we had a communications committee meeting last week. And one item we talked about earlier in the spring, but we learned last summer that the farmers market attendance really thins out in the summer, and so we didn't broach it at the time, but bringing back kind of elected leaders at the farmers market. The farmers market runs until the end of October. Kind of thought, especially with the potential of kind of the school and kind of just a lot happening in our community, that even if it was just one of the months, so like one in September and one in October, wanted to kind of throw it out there, thoughts on kind of similar, we would do it Sign Up Genius, so if no one's there, Whitney wouldn't advertise it in the crier. If folks are around and feeling like, hey, it's gonna be a nice Saturday, I'll go sit there for an hour or two, and if folks are around, be there for conversation, questions. But I didn't wanna, if there was no interest or value seen in it, then we wouldn't do it, but now would be the time to kind of start getting it out there. Thoughts?
Good idea.
Okay. Throw it out there, we'll see. And again, if there's no one signed up, then Whitney won't advertise it, and if we've got folks. And I think the thought would do that we would, like we did towards the end, is we would throw out the invite for the Cumberland representatives on the school board as well to join us. Okay, that's all I had.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? Meeting adjourned.
There we go. Well, now she all hung me out